A fearless farm owner transforms her humble homestead into a secret fortress to fight a ruthless empire. She uncovers explosive evidence that exposes deep-rooted corruption and betrayal. Hidden alliances form as oppressed communities rally under her determined leadership. Covert operations and high-stakes ambushes disrupt the enemy's stranglehold on the region. Every calculated strike brings the resistance closer to toppling the corrupt regime. A series of daring missions reveal the enemy's secrets and fuel a growing public uprising. In the face of brutal counterattacks, her unwavering resolve inspires hope across the land. Every battle fought and every sacrifice made adds fuel to a revolution destined to reshape the future. The ultimate showdown looms as the united resistance prepares for a decisive, final assault. Stay with us to find out how this epic story concludes, and don't forget to subscribe for more thrilling tales ahead. Clara Everhart had always known that her destiny was entwined with the land she nurtured, a quiet promise whispered by the wind that rustled through the fields of Maple Ridge. The modest farm, nestled in a secluded valley bordered by ancient pines and rolling meadows, was far more than a collection of weathered barns and fertile plots. It was a living testament to a relentless spirit and the indomitable will of a young woman who dared to challenge fate itself. From the earliest days of her youth, Clara had been captivated by the mysteries of nature. The land spoke to her in a language of rustling leaves and murmuring brooks, its every secret waiting to be unraveled beneath her careful touch. She grew up amid the gentle cadence of seasons, where summer's golden heat melted into crisp autumns and then surrendered to the silent embrace of winter. This cyclical rhythm of life taught her that every trial was but a prelude to renewal, a lesson that would shape her path in ways she had not yet foreseen. Her beginnings on Maple Ridge were marked by both promise and hardship. In the shadow of looming financial pressures and the specter of a past she dared not speak of aloud, Clara had assumed the stewardship of her family's small holding. With little more than inherited wisdom, a modest collection of tools, and a fierce determination, she transformed barren fields into thriving gardens and dilapidated barns into bastions of hope. The early mornings found her walking among rows of newly sprouted crops, her gaze fixed on horizons that stretched far beyond the visible boundaries of her land. Each seed she planted was an act of defiance against despair, a silent vow that beauty and sustenance could emerge even from the harshest of soils. Yet, beneath the serene surface of Maple Ridge, undercurrents of danger and treachery began to stir. Whispers among the neighboring communities hinted at the encroachment of shadowy figures whose ambitions stretched beyond mere profit. Rumors spoke of clandestine deals, of a network of corrupt interests that sought to seize control of the region's resources. Clara, though outwardly serene and composed, was not oblivious to these murmurs. Her intuition, honed through years of solitary toil and quiet observation, warned her that the tranquility of her beloved farm was but an illusion, a fragile veneer shielding deeper, more insidious threats. It was during one of those long, wind-swept evenings, when the sky painted itself in hues of deep violet and fiery orange, that Clara first sensed the weight of impending peril. A distant hum, almost imperceptible against the symphony of crickets and rustling corn stalks, hinted at the approach of something far more calculated than the ordinary rhythms of rural life. The sound did not belong to the natural chorus of the countryside, and its steady persistence sent ripples of unease through her heart. In that moment, the farm transformed from a haven of gentle routines to a stage for an unseen drama, a silent struggle between order and chaos, hope and despair. In the days that followed, Clara's every sense was heightened. She began to notice the subtle shifts in the behavior of those around her. The normally placid farmers in neighboring fields exchanged wary glances and hushed words, their eyes reflecting a blend of suspicion and fear. A solitary traveler passing through town left behind cryptic remarks about the rising storm and a darkness that had been lurking in plain sight. Even the local constable, a man known for his gruff pragmatism, seemed unusually vigilant, patrolling the perimeters of the small community with an intensity that belied the outward calm of Maple Ridge. Clara, however, did not yield to panic. With a mind as sharp as the edge of a plowshare and a heart hardened by years of solitary battles, she set about reinforcing her sanctuary. She embarked on a meticulous plan to fortify the farm, not only through physical barriers, a patchwork of reinforced fences and strategically placed watchtowers, but also by cultivating an intricate network of informants among the locals. The very land that had nurtured her was now to serve as her ally in the unfolding struggle. Every rustle of the wind, every subtle movement among the trees, was catalogued in her memory, forming the basis of a silent intelligence that would prove invaluable in the days to come. Within the humble walls of her farmhouse, Clara spent long hours poring over old maps and faded documents, piecing together the hidden history of Maple Ridge. These records revealed a tapestry of forgotten conflicts and alliances, a legacy of resilience in the face of exploitation. It became apparent that her farm was not merely a personal inheritance, but a cornerstone in a larger, more profound struggle, a struggle that spanned generations. The more she uncovered, the more she realized that the forces arrayed against her were not random marauders or faceless corporate interests, but a deeply entrenched network of power and corruption that had long manipulated the fortunes of the region. Even as these revelations unfolded, Clara maintained a careful balance between vigilance and the everyday duties of farm life. The care of her animals, the tending of her crops, and the quiet moments spent watching the sunset over the distant hills were rituals that sustained her, providing brief respites from the weight of her responsibilities. In these moments of solitude, she found strength in the simple beauty of nature, a reminder that life, in all its complexity, was worth defending. It was during one such twilight, when the sky blazed with the dying light of the day and the horizon was bathed in a soft, amber glow, that Clara's resolve crystallized. She understood that the battle she was preparing for was not merely for her own survival or for the sanctity of her farm, it was for the preservation of a way of life, a tribute to the enduring power of community and the unbreakable bond between a land and the souls who cherished it. The first signs of overt resistance emerged subtly. A seasoned neighbor, known for his quiet wisdom and weathered hands, began leaving discreet signals, small tokens of shared determination, at the edges of the property. Other residents, each with their own scars of past betrayals, gradually coalesced around a common purpose. Without fanfare or the trappings of formal leadership, a silent pact was forged among them, an unspoken understanding that the time had come to stand together against an encroaching darkness. Even as tensions mounted and the undercurrents of conspiracies deepened, the spirit of unity began to glimmer in the hearts of those who had long felt marginalized by the forces of greed and exploitation. Clara's own preparations grew more elaborate with each passing day. She expanded her network of contacts, discreetly forging alliances with individuals who possessed skills that could prove essential in the looming conflict. There were those adept in the subtle arts of observation, the clandestine operators who could monitor the movements of those who would seek to undermine her sanctuary. There were also those with technical acumen, capable of rigging the farm with rudimentary yet effective surveillance devices that could detect even the faintest hint of intrusion. Her strategy was as much about gathering intelligence as it was about defending a cherished way of life, and every piece of information was meticulously recorded. Every potential threat analyzed with an eye for both immediate danger and long-term consequences. At the heart of Clara's endeavor was an unyielding conviction that adversity, no matter how formidable, could be met with courage, foresight, and an unwavering commitment to the truth. The land itself seemed to echo her determination, the winds carried whispers of ancient valor, and the earth, long steeped in the struggles of those who had come before her, resonated with an energy that defied the passage of time. In those quiet moments, as the moon cast a silvery glow over the fields and the night was punctuated by the distant calls of nocturnal creatures, Clara felt a deep kinship with the generations who had fought for justice and dignity long before the modern world had encroached upon their sacred spaces. Yet, even as she fortified her defenses and deepened her understanding of the hidden currents shaping her world, Clara was acutely aware that the true test of her resolve lay ahead. The first tremors of an insidious plot were already reverberating beyond the boundaries of Maple Ridge. Unseen eyes and unseen hands began to move in the shadows, orchestrating maneuvers that would soon ripple outward, threatening to upend the fragile equilibrium of the region. With every new piece of intelligence, the scale of the impending challenge grew clearer, a meticulously woven network of deceit, corruption, and exploitation was tightening its grip on the heart of the land. In the soft glow of dawn, when the first light of day revealed both the promise and the perils of a new beginning, Clara Everhart stood resolute. The small farm, with all its scars and beauty, had become her sanctuary and her battleground. Every furrow in the soil, every weathered structure, and every rustling leaf bore silent witness to the struggles of the past and the promise of a future that she was determined to shape. It was a future where the strength of a single individual, united with the collective will of a community, could defy even the darkest machinations of power. As the day broke over Maple Ridge, its light cast long shadows behind the towering pines, and Clara's figure, resolute against the soft hues of morning, embodied a quiet defiance that belied the turmoil to come. The intricate tapestry of her life, woven with threads of hardship, hope, and unwavering determination, had reached a pivotal moment. In that delicate balance between calm and chaos, between the enduring legacy of the land and the relentless surge of an impending storm, Clara's journey was only just beginning, a journey that would test her resolve, challenge her ingenuity, and ultimately define the fate of a community that believed in the power of unity over tyranny. In the days that followed the dawning realization of imminent peril, the pulse of Maple Ridge quickened to an almost palpable rhythm. The air, once filled with the gentle cadence of nature's cycle, now vibrated with an undercurrent of urgency. Clara Everhart, still standing as the solitary sentinel of her cherished land, began to orchestrate a plan that would see her community rise as one against the encroaching darkness. The quiet determination that had once defined her solitary mornings was now tempered by a strategic acumen born of relentless study and personal sacrifice. Every inch of the farm, from the weather-beaten silo to the winding dirt roads that threaded through the fields, was reimagined as both a stronghold and a bastion of resistance. The once familiar faces of Maple Ridge took on new roles as whispers of conspiracy and subtle acts of defiance began to ripple outward. Neighbors who had long lived on the margins of the established order started to show signs of unity that belied their previously scattered existence. There was Elias, the taciturn carpenter whose weathered hands could fashion a fortification from splintered wood and iron, and Miriam, a former schoolteacher whose gentle presence now concealed a shrewd mind capable of decoding even the most cryptic signals of betrayal. As these individuals converged around Clara's quiet call to arms, the rural community transformed into a covert collective whose purpose was clear: to reclaim the autonomy of their lives and protect the legacy of the land they held dear. Clara's mornings evolved into meticulous rituals of surveillance and intelligence gathering. With an assortment of rudimentary devices, scavenged cameras, sound recorders, and even repurposed agricultural sensors, the farm became a nexus of covert monitoring. The devices, hidden among the wildflowers and behind ancient oaks, captured movements along the dusty perimeter and recorded the quiet rustle of vehicles that ventured too close under the cover of twilight. Each beep and flicker of a screen served as a silent warning: the enemy was not merely a faceless specter but a tangible threat that maneuvered with calculated precision. The threat itself took on a shape as elusive as the shifting shadows at dusk. Rumors began circulating about a syndicate known only as the Iron Veil, a network of corporate interests, local power brokers, and well-armed mercenaries whose influence had crept into the heart of the region. It was said that the Iron Veil had long plotted the acquisition of Maple Ridge, not solely for its strategic agricultural value but for the symbolic power that came with dominating a community that had resisted the encroachments of modern exploitation. Clara learned that this shadow organization had been responsible for a series of subtle, yet deeply destabilizing actions in nearby towns: quiet arsons, sudden bankruptcies of local businesses, and even the mysterious disappearance of outspoken local figures. Each incident, though shrouded in uncertainty, added layers of dread to the already tense atmosphere. Despite the growing menace, the transformation within Maple Ridge was not solely marked by fear and anxiety. The collective spirit of the community began to assert itself in ways that were both spontaneous and meticulously planned. Small acts of rebellion multiplied with the ingenuity of those who had once resigned themselves to a quiet existence. Secret meetings were held in the back rooms of local diners, in the basements of modest homes, and even within the quiet solitude of abandoned barns. Here, strategies were debated in hushed tones, and blueprints for defending the community were drafted on scraps of paper by the light of flickering oil lamps. The narrative that had once been relegated to the background of rural life was now front and center, a narrative of collective struggle, of unity forged in the crucible of shared adversity. Clara, whose own resolve had been tempered in the fires of past personal losses and battles fought in silence, emerged as both a leader and a symbol of unwavering resilience. Her days were spent not only tending to the fields and animals but also in fostering this underground movement. She taught her neighbors how to fortify their homes, how to communicate silently through coded messages hidden in everyday interactions, and how to recognize the subtle signs of an impending threat. With every lesson, she instilled a belief that survival was not a solitary endeavor, but a communal pursuit, a collective effort to reclaim control over a destiny that had long been manipulated by unseen hands. The transformation of Maple Ridge was not without its own costs. As the days turned into weeks, and the specter of the Iron Veil loomed larger, the community began to experience the strains of an undercurrent of constant vigilance. Long nights were spent in anxious watch, where the silence was often punctuated by the distant hum of engines or the soft murmur of voices plodding in the shadows. The natural rhythms of life, meals shared at weathered wooden tables, quiet moments of reflection in sunlit courtyards, even the simple act of tending to a flower bed, became imbued with an intensity born of the knowledge that each moment could be the calm before an unforeseen storm. Amidst this backdrop of preparation and latent danger, Clara discovered further evidence of the Iron Veil's insidious designs. Hidden among the old ledgers in the town's dusty archives were records that pointed to financial irregularities, questionable land deals, and clandestine transfers of power that had quietly undermined the community's autonomy over decades. These documents, fragile as the wings of a moth and as potent as a rallying cry, revealed that the Iron Veil had systematically infiltrated the institutions that were meant to safeguard the citizens' rights. The archives spoke of bribes paid in silence, of contracts signed under duress, and of a relentless drive to commodify every facet of local life, from the soil that yielded the crops to the very spirit of independence that defined Maple Ridge. In the midst of this labyrinthine struggle, the seasons shifted. The once vibrant green of summer began to yield to the mellow tones of autumn, a time of harvest that carried with it both the promise of abundance and the somber reminder of inevitable decline. As leaves turned to brilliant hues of red and gold, Clara's focus sharpened. The harvest season, with its inherent cycles of growth and decay, became a metaphor for the larger battle at hand, a struggle to reclaim what had been slowly eroded by the relentless forces of greed and exploitation. In the golden light of early mornings, when dew still clung to the fields like fragile jewels, Clara moved with purpose. Every step was measured, every action deliberate, as she coordinated the final phase of her strategy to confront the encroaching threat. The heightened state of alert had also begun to alter the natural landscape of Maple Ridge. The familiar sounds of nature were now intermingled with the distant echoes of machines and the furtive whispers of outsiders testing the boundaries of the community. The old paths, once taken for granted as mere conduits between fields and homesteads, now assumed a dual significance, as potential routes of invasion and as critical arteries for the community's secret communications. Clara's ingenuity shone through as she repurposed old irrigation channels into hidden passageways, using them to send messages and supplies without detection. In these innovative adaptations, the natural world and human determination merged into a formidable force against the shadow of oppression. Yet, it was not solely the physical landscape that underwent transformation. The hearts and minds of the people of Maple Ridge were being reshaped by a new narrative, one that spoke of self-reliance, mutual support, and the courage to defy an overwhelming system of control. The communal spirit was nurtured through shared hardships and collective triumphs. Stories of quiet heroism began to circulate, of a farmer who, in the dead of night, outsmarted a group of intruders by redirecting their path through a labyrinth of abandoned silos, of a young woman who, armed with nothing but a keen sense of observation, uncovered a hidden cache of incriminating documents that laid bare the true nature of the Iron Veil's operations. Each tale, though steeped in the ordinary struggles of rural life, carried the weight of extraordinary resolve, a testament to the power of unity when faced with an insidious enemy. As the days lengthened and the threat grew ever more tangible, Clara's strategic vision evolved. It was no longer sufficient to simply defend against incursions. The time had come to actively dismantle the network that sought to enslave their community. With painstaking care, she began to forge alliances beyond the borders of Maple Ridge. Discreet communications were established with sympathetic figures in neighboring towns, local leaders, disillusioned officials, and even a few courageous journalists willing to expose the corruption that had long festered beneath the surface. These alliances, built on mutual respect and a shared desire for justice, promised to extend the reach of their resistance far beyond the confines of their small, beleaguered community. The momentum of the movement reached a crescendo one crisp, early autumn evening. As twilight draped itself over the fields and a chill wind stirred the fallen leaves, Clara convened a secret gathering beneath the ancient oak that stood as the silent guardian of Maple Ridge. There, amid a circle of determined faces illuminated by the soft glow of lanterns, the community's resolve crystallized into a single, unwavering purpose. They recognized that the coming days would demand sacrifices, both personal and collective, and that the battle they were about to wage would test the very limits of their endurance. But in that moment, as the whispers of hope mingled with the rustling of leaves, the people of Maple Ridge understood that their strength lay not in the power of any single individual, but in the unity of a community bound by shared struggles and a common dream. Clara stood among them, a quiet beacon of resilience whose eyes shone with a fierce determination that belied the weight of the challenges ahead. The quiet murmur of the gathered crowd was more than the sound of fear or uncertainty. It was the heartbeat of a community awakening, a collective pledge to defend the land that had nurtured them for generations. The unity forged that night, in the hushed intimacy of a rural clearing, set the stage for a campaign that would not only seek to repel the forces of the Iron Veil but also to restore the dignity and autonomy of every soul who called Maple Ridge home. In the days that followed that pivotal night, preparations escalated from the covert to the overt. Small, coordinated acts of sabotage disrupted the operations of the Iron Veil. Equipment was subtly disabled, communication lines were intercepted, and clandestine meetings among the conspirators were infiltrated by insiders whose loyalty to the community proved unshakable. The ripple effects of these actions reverberated through the region, sowing seeds of doubt and disarray within the ranks of those who had underestimated the resolve of a united people. Even as the oppressive presence of the enemy loomed ever larger, every act of defiance reinforced the community's commitment to a future untainted by corruption and subjugation. In the midst of this intricate dance of strategy and subterfuge, Clara remained ever vigilant. Each night, as the farm's silhouettes melded with the darkness, she would pace along the perimeters of her property, her thoughts as fluid as the wind that swept across the fields. The responsibilities of leadership weighed heavily upon her, yet every burden was balanced by the knowledge that she was not alone, that the spirit of Maple Ridge was a living, breathing force that could not be extinguished by mere tyranny. With each passing moment, as the line between safety and danger blurred, Clara's conviction deepened. The farm was no longer just a sanctuary, it was a crucible where the metal of an entire community was being forged. As the season edged closer to winter, a time when the land was traditionally laid bare to the forces of nature, the community's preparations took on an almost sacred quality. The natural world, in its austere beauty, became both a challenge and an ally. The crisp air, laden with the scent of impending frost, carried with it both the promise of hardship and the invigorating call to action. Clara, ever the student of the land, interpreted these signs with a blend of scientific observation and intuitive wisdom. She recognized that the coming cold would test not only their physical fortifications but also the resilience of their spirit. The lessons of the harvest, the cycles of growth and dormancy, all converged into a single, undeniable truth, that even in the harshest of winters, life persisted, quietly and resolutely. Within this intricate interplay of preparation, community, and the relentless march of time, the saga of Maple Ridge continued to unfold, a narrative that was as much about the reclamation of dignity as it was about the defense of a way of life. Every act of defiance, every secret meeting in the fading light, and every whispered plan under the cover of night reinforced a truth that had long been buried under layers of neglect and despair, that the power to shape one's destiny lay not in the hands of corrupt tyrants, but in the collective will of those who dared to believe in a better future. Thus, as the first frost threatened to encase the land in a brittle silence, the people of Maple Ridge braced themselves for the trials to come. In the quiet hours before dawn, when the sky was a canvas of deep indigo and the chill of winter seeped into every corner, Clara Everhart and her newfound allies prepared to meet the inevitable confrontation with a courage that transcended fear. Their struggle, born of necessity and nurtured by hope, was poised to reshape not only their own destinies but the very fabric of the society they had long been denied. In that enduring moment, as the promise of unity in the resolute spirit of resistance melded with the raw, unyielding beauty of the land, the narrative of Maple Ridge advanced into its next, uncertain chapter, one where every whispered secret, every bold act of rebellion, and every courageous step taken in the face of overwhelming odds would stand as testament to the unbreakable bond between a people and the land they vowed to protect. In the deepening chill of early winter, as frost began to lace the edges of every leaf and branch, Clara Everhart's resolve evolved into something even more formidable. The once quiet farm now hummed with an undercurrent of urgency and clandestine energy, its every corner transformed into a potential outpost for resistance. The network that had formed in the wake of the initial threat had grown denser and more intricate, threading its way through the fabric of the region. Neighbors who had once hesitated now moved with determined purpose, and quiet whispers in the night had blossomed into a strategic blueprint for defiance. The Iron Veil, sensing the mounting defiance from Maple Ridge and its allies, had begun to intensify its operations. Rumors emerged of discreetly orchestrated raids on remote homesteads and sudden interruptions of local supply lines. In these covert maneuvers, the enemy sought to unsettle the fragile sense of unity that Clara had so painstakingly nurtured. It became increasingly clear that the adversary was not simply content to remain in the shadows, they intended to make a statement, to force the community into submission by sowing discord and fear. Clara's nights, once filled with quiet reflection under starlight, now carried the weight of calculated vigilance. She would often traverse the perimeter of her land, her boots crunching on the hardened ground as she inspected every improvised sensor and hidden camera. Every creak of an old barn, every murmur carried on the wind, was meticulously noted. She refined her strategies with the precision of a seasoned tactician, integrating the natural lay of the land with the ingenious modifications her allies had devised. Hidden paths that once served as mere conduits for water were now repurposed as covert escape routes, while abandoned outbuildings were repurposed into safe houses for trusted confidants. Every detail, from the curvature of a fence to the subtle shift in a tree's shadow, was an integral piece in the complex puzzle of resistance. The community's collective ingenuity began to reveal startling new dimensions of resilience. Amid the brittle cold, families who had long labored in isolation found strength in shared purpose. A network of messengers, each entrusted with coded signals and discrete meeting points, expanded its reach beyond the immediate environs of Maple Ridge. In distant hamlets and neighboring valleys, similar pockets of resistance emerged, people who had silently borne witness to injustices and now yearned for a future unblemished by corruption. Their communications, woven through a tapestry of clandestine signals and covert rendezvous, began to expose the deeper network of influence that the Iron Veil had established in the region. At the heart of this burgeoning movement, Clara's own journey took on a more introspective tone. She began to unearth hidden fragments of the past, old diaries, weathered letters, and forgotten documents that hinted at a legacy of rebellion stretching back through the generations. These relics painted a portrait of a lineage not defined by quiet submission but by bold, unyielding defiance against oppressive forces. In their faded ink and brittle pages, Clara discovered echoes of struggles that mirrored her own, a testament to the timeless nature of resistance. The knowledge fortified her resolve, imbuing every calculated step with the conviction that her fight was part of a grander narrative. As the days wore on and the first true signs of a coordinated enemy offensive emerged, Clara found herself thrust into a labyrinth of decisions and unforeseen challenges. One bitterly cold morning, a trusted member of the network, a former mechanic known for his innovative spirit, returned with unsettling news. His eyes, usually alight with the fervor of ingenuity, now betrayed the heavy toll of witnessing merciless violence. A small group, dispatched under the guise of routine inspections, had been seen maneuvering with an unnerving precision near a cluster of remote homesteads. Their movements were calculated, and their intentions unmistakable. This reconnaissance mission was no longer an abstract threat, it was the vanguard of a deliberate, coordinated incursion meant to destabilize the region's spirit. Clara absorbed the news with a stoic calm, each word deepening her resolve rather than instilling fear. In the dim light of her study, a room cluttered with maps, diagrams, and the scattered remnants of late-night strategy sessions, she pored over the intelligence reports. The information, though fragmented, began to coalesce into a clear picture. The Iron Veil was mobilizing for an overt demonstration of power. They intended not only to strike at isolated targets but to shatter the fragile unity that had taken root in the hearts of the people. The planned assault was meant to be both a psychological and physical blow, one that would remind everyone of the enemy's relentless capacity for cruelty and precision. Emboldened by this understanding, Clara initiated a series of rapid countermeasures. The core group of allies was summoned to a secret meeting held in a converted barn on the far side of the property, a structure that had once served as a simple storage facility and now, under the cloak of darkness, had been transformed into a command center. Here, under the feeble glow of battery-powered lanterns, the details of the impending threat were laid out with meticulous clarity. The strategies devised in that room were as much about prevention as they were about offense. Plans were set in motion to intercept the enemy's supply lines, to disable their communication nodes, and to create diversions that would fragment their ranks. Beyond the tactical adjustments, there was an equally critical psychological campaign underway. Clara, with her innate ability to inspire without resorting to grandiose speeches, became the silent symbol of steadfast defiance. In the quiet of the night, when the tension was at its peak, her presence on the periphery of the community was both a reassurance and a call to arms. The villagers began to speak of her not just as the keeper of the farm but as a guardian of a legacy that transcended mere landownership. In hushed conversations around flickering fireplaces, elders recounted the ancient tales of warriors who had fought against overwhelming odds, drawing parallels to the modern struggle unfolding before their eyes. Amid these preparations, an unexpected ripple of internal dissent began to surface. Not all were convinced that defiance against the Iron Veil was the only path forward. In quieter corners of the community, voices emerged that questioned whether confrontation might lead to needless bloodshed and irreversible loss. These doubts, though whispered in the shadows, posed a formidable challenge to the unity that Clara had worked so hard to forge. The delicate balance of trust was at risk, and with every passing day, the specter of internal strife threatened to undermine the collective effort. Clara, aware of the fragility of such bonds, sought to address these concerns with a blend of pragmatism and empathy. She initiated private dialogues with influential community members, reassuring them that their vigilance and caution were as vital as their courage in the face of adversity. Her measured approach, rooted in an unyielding belief in the strength of unity, gradually quelled the simmering doubts. As winter's icy grip tightened its hold on Maple Ridge, the first overt signs of conflict began to manifest. One fateful evening, under a sky marbled with the haunting beauty of swirling clouds and the glimmer of a reluctant moon, the enemy made its move. In the dead of night, when the world was shrouded in silence and the natural order of the countryside lay suspended, the coordinated incursion unfolded with an almost spectral precision. Figures clad in dark uniforms, their features obscured by the interplay of shadow and light, approached the outer boundaries of the community. Their presence was like a malignant force creeping over the land, intent on quashing the fragile spark of rebellion that had taken root. Clara, ever vigilant, had long anticipated such a moment. From her hidden vantage point on a ridge overlooking the far fields, she watched as the enemy's figures advanced, their movements synchronized and eerily deliberate. A hush fell over the landscape, a silence that was as oppressive as it was ominous. Without a trace of hesitation, she activated a series of prearranged signals that rippled across the network of resistance. The quiet beeps of concealed devices, the subtle flashes of hidden lights, and the discreet gestures exchanged between trusted allies all signaled that the time to act had come. In that charged moment, the battle was not fought with the clamor of overt warfare but with the precision of well-coordinated subterfuge. Units of local defenders, hidden in the natural crevices of the land and the cleverly repurposed structures of old farmhouses, sprang into action. They moved like silent wraiths through the cold, their every step measured and purposeful. The invaders, caught off guard by the rapid mobilization of the resistance, found themselves ensnared in a meticulously laid trap. Disruptions in their communication lines, orchestrated diversions, and the sudden appearance of armed contingents created a web of confusion that fragmented their initial formation. As the skirmish unfolded, Clara maintained her composure amidst the chaos. Her eyes, sharp as ever, tracked the ebb and flow of the confrontation from her secluded watchtower. Each maneuver by the enemy was noted and countered by an equally calculated response from the defenders. The conflict was as much a battle of wits as it was one of force. Every feint and counterattack was a testament to the intricate planning that had gone into their resistance. The quiet determination that had long characterized Maple Ridge was now taking on the form of an organized, resilient counteroffensive, a symphony of covert operations that resonated with the silent strength of a people unwilling to yield. The initial clash, though brief, sent shockwaves through the region. Word of the encounter spread swiftly, carried on the wings of the same clandestine channels that had long linked the disparate pockets of resistance. In its wake, the community experienced a surge of both relief and renewed trepidation. The enemy, though repelled in this first foray, had demonstrated the breadth of their commitment to quashing the uprising. Their assault was a stark reminder that the battle was far from over. Rather, it was only the opening act of a prolonged struggle that would test every facet of the community's mettle. In the hours that followed the confrontation, as the adrenaline of battle slowly ebbed into a heavy, contemplative quiet, Clara moved among her people. She surveyed the aftermath not with triumph, but with the measured pragmatism of one who knew that each skirmish was merely a prelude to a greater conflict. The scars of the encounter, both physical and emotional, would serve as a reminder of the cost of resistance and the price of hope. Yet, in that very moment, there was also a palpable sense of vindication. The actions of that night had confirmed a simple truth: the collective will of a unified community was a force that could not be easily broken. The frost that had begun to crystallize on the windows of every home seemed now to glisten with the promise of a future reclaimed. As the defenders returned to their concealed stations and the enemy's forces receded into the darkened fringes of the landscape, the resolve of Maple Ridge's people only deepened. Clara, standing at the threshold of a new dawn, allowed herself a rare moment of quiet introspection. The victory of that night, however modest it might appear on a tactical level, was a resounding affirmation of everything she had believed in: the enduring power of unity, the relentless drive for justice, and the unyielding spirit of those who, against all odds, chose to stand up for their rightful home. In the coming days, as word of the confrontation spread even beyond the boundaries of the valley, Clara and her allies intensified their preparations. The enemy, now fully aware of the strength of the resistance, would no doubt escalate their efforts. In response, the network of allies expanded its reach, drawing in reinforcements from far-flung communities that had long suffered under the yoke of exploitation. Plans were redrawn, strategies refined, and every available resource marshaled to fortify not only the physical defenses of Maple Ridge but also the very spirit of its people. The winter air, sharp and unyielding, bore witness to the transformation of the region. Every whispered conversation, every clandestine meeting, and every act of defiance contributed to a growing narrative, a narrative of liberation and the unassailable power of collective will. As Clara walked the frost-lined paths of her farm, she felt the profound weight of history on her shoulders, a responsibility to honor the struggles of those who had come before and to pave the way for those who would follow. The land, in its timeless stoicism, served as both an ally and a silent witness to the unfolding drama, its ancient soil absorbing the echoes of past rebellions and nurturing the seeds of a future yet to be written. Thus, as the early light of a new day began to dispel the lingering shadows of night, the saga of Maple Ridge entered yet another phase, a phase defined not by despair or capitulation, but by the enduring, unbreakable will of a community determined to defend its legacy. In that determined silence, with the frost glistening like fragments of hope on every surface, Clara Everhart steeled herself for the challenges ahead. The enemy had made their intentions known, and now, more than ever, the fight for justice, dignity, and the sanctity of the land had become an unyielding crusade, a crusade that would forge an unbreakable bond between the people and the soil that had sustained them through centuries of hardship and hope. As the first snow began to melt into the shallow rivulets of spring, the hardened resolve of the Maple Ridge community only grew stronger. The once frostbitten landscape was now punctuated by the tentative green shoots of renewal, each one a silent promise that life would persist despite the lingering shadow of oppression. Clara Everhart, whose every action had become a symphony of cautious determination and strategic foresight, now found herself at a crossroads where the struggle for survival was evolving into a battle for a new beginning. The enemy, the insidious Iron Veil, had retreated temporarily into the darkened corners of their expansive network, but their presence was felt in every whispered rumor and every calculated disruption. In the soft light of early spring mornings, when the chill of winter still clung stubbornly to the air, the people of Maple Ridge moved with a deliberate intensity that spoke of both hope and unyielding defiance. Clara's days were now consumed with long hours poring over maps, deciphering coded communications intercepted through makeshift channels, and coordinating with allies who had rallied from far beyond the borders of her modest homestead. The quiet hum of life on the farm, with its ancient oaks and weathered barns, was interwoven with the subtle tension of a community preparing for the inevitable resurgence of enemy tactics. In the dim glow of a hastily constructed command center, once a neglected granary now repurposed with a network of makeshift monitors and salvaged communication devices, Clara studied the shifting patterns of movement not only within her immediate surroundings but also in neighboring hamlets that had begun to echo the spirit of resistance. Every rustle of the wind in the budding branches, every distant footstep along a gravel road, became data points in a growing mosaic of vigilance. Beyond the boundaries of Maple Ridge, the network of resistance had expanded into an underground web of mutual support. Word had spread that the Iron Veil was regrouping, aiming to launch a renewed campaign designed to fracture the solidarity that had been so painstakingly built. In hidden rooms of rustic inns and behind the closed doors of secret meeting halls, representatives of small communities gathered to exchange information and to forge a plan that was as intricate as it was daring. They spoke not of open rebellion but of subtle, surgical strikes, tactics that would disrupt the enemy's lines of communication and sow seeds of discord among their ranks. These strategies, meticulously refined in hushed consultations, were built on the belief that the strength of a dispersed, united people could overwhelm even the most entrenched power structures. Amid these consultations, Clara's own role evolved from that of a steadfast guardian to a master strategist whose every decision was weighed against the potential for both immediate impact and long-term transformation. The once isolated farm, with its modest barns and sprawling fields, was now a nexus of clandestine operations, a place where the natural landscape and human ingenuity fused into a formidable shield against those who sought to impose their will. She reconfigured her homestead, installing hidden caches of supplies, secret escape routes, and even rudimentary defensive measures that blended seamlessly into the pastoral setting. In these preparations, the lines between everyday life and warfare blurred. Tending to the crops and caring for the animals became acts of quiet defiance, each gesture a reminder that life itself was the greatest form of resistance. The community's new strategy was built upon both patience and precision. Clara knew that to counter the Iron Veil's might, it was essential to strike not with brute force, but with the subtle efficiency of coordinated, well-timed actions. The plan was to target the enemy's logistical chains, the transport routes, the communication hubs, and the financial conduits that sustained their oppressive regime. Under the cover of night, teams of trusted allies were dispatched to intercept convoys and sabotage equipment, leaving behind nothing more than cryptic symbols etched in the dirt as a sign of defiance. These actions, though seemingly isolated incidents, were part of a broader mosaic of resistance that spanned multiple communities and reached into the heart of the enemy's network. The pace of these covert operations quickened as spring advanced into a lively yet unpredictable season. The weather, with its sudden showers and unpredictable gusts of wind, became an unintentional ally to those who moved stealthily in its midst. Clara herself often led small groups through hidden paths along meandering trails, their progress masked by the sounds of a world reawakening. Every step taken on the soft, rain-washed earth was measured and deliberate, a silent oath that Maple Ridge and its allied communities would not be subdued without a fight. The strategic brilliance of these efforts was matched only by the emotional toll they exacted. In the quiet solitude of a twilight moment, as she observed the subtle interplay of light and shadow across her fields, Clara allowed herself a rare, fleeting moment of reflection. She recalled memories of long winters past and the hard-fought battles that had shaped her life. Those recollections, both painful and empowering, merged into a deep well of resolve that fueled her every action. At the same time, tensions within the broader resistance began to manifest in unexpected ways. As the Iron Veil's reprisals intensified, cracks started to appear in the facade of unity. Doubts emerged among some of the more cautious members who questioned whether the escalating cycle of sabotage and counterattacks might lead to unintended consequences, such as collateral damage or the alienation of key segments of the community. These concerns, expressed in somber voices during secret gatherings, prompted Clara to engage in a delicate balancing act. With unwavering calm and a strategic mind honed by years of quiet endurance, she reached out to those in doubt, listening to their fears and reinforcing the vision of a future where every act of defiance was a step toward reclaiming not just land, but dignity. Her efforts were marked by a measured blend of empathy and unyielding determination, a combination that slowly but surely mended the fragile bonds of trust within the resistance. Even as these internal debates unfolded, the external threat loomed larger with each passing day. The Iron Veil, now emboldened by the apparent cracks in the unified front, began orchestrating more aggressive maneuvers. Their operatives, dressed in uniforms designed to be both intimidating and inconspicuous, were spotted moving through strategic choke points along the main supply routes. Rumors spread that a major offensive was being planned, a decisive blow aimed at crippling the resistance once and for all. In response, Clara and her network embarked on a comprehensive review of every known weakness in their defensive perimeter. Night after night, under the clandestine glow of smuggled lanterns and the soft hum of clandestine radios, plans were revised, contingencies set, and the community's collective resolve steeled for the coming confrontation. The natural world around Maple Ridge also played a silent, yet pivotal role in this unfolding drama. The ancient hills and dense woods that had sheltered the farm for generations became allies in their own right, offering concealment and a tactical advantage to those who knew how to harness their secrets. Hidden clearings served as meeting points, while dense thickets and meandering streams provided natural barriers that complicated any enemy advance. In these settings, the interplay of nature and human will created an environment where even the most technologically advanced forces of the Iron Veil found themselves at a disadvantage. The land, with its rugged contours and timeless endurance, stood as a testament to the deep-rooted connection between the people and the heritage they fought to protect. As the days melded into nights and the first stirrings of a grand confrontation began to form on the horizon, Clara's leadership emerged as the steady fulcrum upon which the fate of Maple Ridge balanced. Her vision was clear: to harness the collective energy of a community united by hardship and hope, to transform every setback into an opportunity for renewal, and to forge a future where the oppressive shadows of the past would be banished by the light of collective courage. With the stakes higher than ever, every member of the resistance took on roles that transcended the ordinary. From the youngest farmhand who had learned to send coded messages through the subtle gestures of everyday interactions, to the elders whose silent wisdom guided the intricate planning sessions, every individual became a vital thread in the fabric of their shared destiny. In the midst of this intricate tapestry of strategy, hope, and unyielding determination, the enemy's presence became a constant reminder of what was at stake. The calculated incursions and sporadic acts of sabotage by the Iron Veil were not merely isolated incidents of aggression, they were deliberate provocations intended to shatter the fragile unity of a community that dared to dream of a life free from exploitation. And yet, with every attempt to impose fear, the people of Maple Ridge grew bolder, their actions more synchronized, their resolve more unbreakable. The land itself seemed to respond in kind. The once dormant streams now sang with a vibrant melody of renewal, and the winds carried not only the scent of spring but the whispered promise of liberation. In a decisive moment that came one clear, brisk evening, a convoy believed to be part of the Iron Veil's resurgent force was intercepted on a narrow, winding road that cut through a dense copse of trees. The ambush, executed with a precision born of months of careful planning, was swift and disorienting. Shadows moved with purpose among the trees, and within moments, the convoy was halted, its drivers and guards thrown into disarray by the sudden onslaught of well-coordinated resistance fighters. The operation was not designed for mass casualties, but rather to send a potent message, a demonstration that every inch of the land was under vigilant protection, and that even the most powerful adversary could be met with an implacable, united front. As the echoes of the ambush reverberated through the valley, the news spread like wildfire through the underground channels of the resistance. It was not merely an isolated tactical success, it was a turning point, a moment when the collective will of a community overwhelmed the cold machinations of a ruthless enemy. Clara, standing amidst the soft glow of twilight as she surveyed the scene from a hidden vantage point, felt a surge of quiet pride tempered by the sober understanding that this victory was but one step in a long, arduous journey. Every heartbeat of the land, every rustle of the newly awakened flora, resonated with the conviction that their struggle was far from over, yet undeniably on the path toward a reclaimed future. In the ensuing days, as plans were redrawn and the network of resistance grew ever more robust, the community of Maple Ridge began to experience a profound transformation. The very essence of daily life, the mundane rhythms of tending to crops, mending fences, and sharing meals under open skies, became imbued with a deeper significance. These acts, once taken for granted, now carried the weight of rebellion and the promise of renewal. Every task was performed with a heightened awareness of its role in sustaining not only a livelihood but a collective identity forged in the crucible of defiance. Clara's leadership, marked by a rare blend of strategic brilliance and empathetic connection, continued to galvanize her people. She traversed the sprawling expanse of her farm with a measured step, her eyes ever watchful for the slightest indication of an enemy move, yet always mindful of the beauty and resilience of the natural world. The interplay of light and shadow across the fields, the vibrant colors of wildflowers emerging after the thaw, and the persistent, rhythmic pulse of life itself served as constant reminders that renewal was not only possible, it was inevitable. And so, with each passing day, the narrative of Maple Ridge evolved into one of quiet heroism, of small, decisive acts that, when woven together, formed a tapestry of resistance capable of challenging even the most entrenched forces of oppression. In that unfolding saga, the battle for Maple Ridge was more than a struggle for territory or survival, it was a profound contest for the very soul of a community. Every act of sabotage, every clandestine meeting, every whispered word of encouragement in the darkness, and every decisive maneuver on a rain-soaked road added a new layer to a story that was as enduring as it was unpredictable. And as the promise of a new dawn edged closer with each measured step, the legacy of Clara Everhart and her determined band of allies shone like a beacon, a reminder that when united by a common purpose, even the humblest of homesteads could become the cradle of an unyielding revolution. In the weeks following the ambush that had sent ripples of hope and fear throughout the valley, the fragile equilibrium of the region teetered on the brink of transformation. The once familiar landscape of Maple Ridge began to assume new contours of resistance and reimagination. Although the community had rallied beneath the steadfast leadership of Clara Everhart, the unfolding days demanded a deeper reckoning with both internal vulnerabilities and the persistent specter of an enemy that was evolving with every countermeasure. In a subtle shift that marked the next phase of their struggle, Clara initiated plans that would alter not only the tactical landscape but also the very identity of the movement. The name Maple Ridge, once emblematic of quiet rural hope, was slowly being imbued with a new meaning, that of a bastion of liberation, where the ordinary could become extraordinary under the pressure of unity and resolve. As the remnants of winter receded into a tapestry of lingering frost and tentative blossoms, Clara began to reshape the physical and emotional defenses of her domain. Recognizing that the enemy's tactics were not confined solely to physical incursions but extended to the manipulation of perceptions, she established a network of decentralized safe houses and communication nodes throughout the region. In secret locations hidden among groves of towering pines and beneath the tangled boughs of ancient oaks, members of the resistance convened, their meetings a blend of hushed strategy and earnest camaraderie. These clandestine outposts were not merely shelters from the predations of the Iron Veil, they became symbols of self-determination and the quiet, relentless assertion that freedom was a collective right. The enemy, which had once operated under the moniker of the Iron Veil, began to adapt in response to the insurgents' innovative defenses. Reports of their operatives' activities grew more frequent and disturbing, patrols in the dead of night were reconfigured, and covert sabotage escalated into more brazen attempts to fracture the cohesion of the community. In response, Clara refined her approach with a precision that was equal parts pragmatism and visionary foresight. She initiated training sessions in secret, instructing her allies in the art of guerrilla tactics, improvised communications, and counterintelligence measures. The routines of daily life, once defined by the cycles of planting and harvest, were now interwoven with drills and contingency exercises. Neighbors who had once been content with the simplicity of rural existence learned to move silently through moonlit fields, to relay coded messages through the flicker of signal fires, and to recognize the subtle signs of enemy maneuvering among the shifting patterns of shadow and light. As spring advanced and the days grew longer, the natural world around Maple Ridge became both a sanctuary and an arsenal. The thawing streams and budding trees assumed strategic importance, hidden trails along the riverbanks served as escape routes, while the dense clusters of wildflowers offered cover for those on reconnaissance. In this interplay between nature and human ingenuity, Clara found both solace and strength. Each sunrise over the dew-laden fields was a reminder that life, resilient and tenacious, could flourish even amid the specter of looming conflict. The land itself, with its silent testimony of generations past, offered clues to ancient defensive strategies that had once protected its people from marauding forces. Clara immersed herself in these long-forgotten accounts, drawing lessons from the resilience etched in the earth, and integrating these insights into her evolving plan for resistance. Within the fortified boundaries of Maple Ridge, tensions simmered beneath a veneer of renewed hope. The community's unity had been both its greatest strength and its most fragile asset. Small rifts began to emerge as fear and fatigue mingled with determination. Some among the ranks whispered doubts about the cost of continued defiance, questioning whether the escalating cycle of sabotage might eventually exact too steep a toll on innocent lives. Clara, ever aware of the delicate balance between caution and conviction, addressed these concerns with a blend of empathy and unwavering resolve. In private consultations that took place in the soft glow of early morning or beneath the cover of a starry night, she reassured her allies that every sacrifice was an investment in a future defined by dignity and justice. Her measured words and deliberate actions slowly mended the fissures that threatened to undermine their collective effort, reinforcing a common belief that the path to liberation was paved with both resilience and careful pragmatism. The enemy, undeterred by their earlier setback, began a new campaign aimed at shattering the psychological fortitude of the resistance. In a series of coordinated maneuvers, operatives of the Iron Veil, now rebranded in whispers as agents of the Crimson Dominion, targeted key infrastructures in neighboring settlements. Roads that once served as lifelines for trade and communication were blocked by hastily constructed barricades, and the normally vibrant hum of community gatherings was replaced by a pervasive silence of foreboding. This deliberate campaign of disruption was designed to isolate Maple Ridge and sever its links to the broader network of resistance that had been slowly coalescing in the surrounding region. Yet, even as these strategies were set in motion, Clara's preparations ensured that the community would not be isolated for long. Her carefully established channels of covert communication began to pulse with a newfound urgency, linking Maple Ridge with distant pockets of defiant souls who had grown tired of oppression. In a matter of days, messages of solidarity and offers of support flowed like lifeblood through encrypted transmissions, reaffirming that the struggle was larger than any single homestead or valley. Amid this renewed onslaught, a transformative event occurred that would alter the trajectory of the resistance. In a daring operation that defied the enemy's expectations, a contingent of well-prepared fighters from Maple Ridge intercepted a high-value convoy moving along a critical supply route. The ambush, executed with meticulous planning and unyielding precision, resulted in the capture of several key documents that detailed the inner workings of the Crimson Dominion's network. These documents, fragile yet damning in their clarity, revealed the extent of corruption that had infiltrated local institutions and exposed the intricate web of deceit that had allowed the enemy to consolidate its power over the region. The discovery of this evidence galvanized the community. It was as if the very soil beneath their feet had borne witness to a long-forgotten truth, awakening a collective determination to hold those in power accountable. The documents became a rallying point, a tangible symbol of the insurgents' commitment to unveiling the truth and dismantling the oppressive regime that had long festered in the shadows. As the implications of this breakthrough reverberated through Maple Ridge and beyond, Clara's strategy shifted toward a dual approach that combined covert operations with an emerging campaign of public exposure. The idea was not only to weaken the Crimson Dominion through direct sabotage but also to undermine its legitimacy by bringing its crimes to light. In secret meetings held in remote locations, under the guise of routine agricultural gatherings, trusted messengers prepared detailed reports of their findings. These reports were carefully transmitted to sympathetic journalists, reform-minded officials, and grassroots organizations committed to restoring transparency and accountability. The growing evidence of corruption, coupled with the community's unwavering defiance, set the stage for an eventual reckoning that would transcend the immediate battlefield. Within the fortified walls of Maple Ridge, Clara's presence became a beacon of hope that illuminated the dark corners of fear and uncertainty. Her tireless efforts to bridge the gap between covert resistance and public advocacy inspired many who had once harbored doubts about the possibility of change. In quiet moments of reflection, as she walked along the boundary of her property where the early light of dawn revealed both scars and promises etched into the land, Clara contemplated the profound significance of their struggle. It was not merely a battle for survival, but a quest to reclaim the very soul of a community, a quest to restore honor, dignity, and the unassailable right to self-determination. The whispers of ancient battles fought on similar soil echoed in her mind, merging with the contemporary cadence of defiance to create a timeless anthem of resilience. Even as plans for a grand public revelation took shape, the immediate challenges of defense and survival remained paramount. The Crimson Dominion, recognizing the growing threat posed by an emboldened and united populace, began mobilizing its most formidable contingents. In response, Clara and her network activated a series of contingency protocols designed to safeguard both lives and the invaluable evidence they had amassed. A sophisticated system of hidden caches, decoy routes, and secure communication channels was deployed, ensuring that even if one node of resistance were compromised, the overall network would endure. Every member of the community, from the seasoned elders to the vigilant youth, was called upon to perform a role that contributed to the collective shield against the enemy's advances. In this moment of heightened vigilance, the very act of living, tending to the land, sharing a meal, or simply watching the sunrise, became an act of rebellion, a statement that the spirit of freedom was unassailable even in the face of overwhelming odds. The days grew longer and the promise of summer shimmered on the horizon, infusing the valley with an undercurrent of renewal and possibility. In the midst of this transformative season, the struggle of Maple Ridge and its allies entered a phase marked by both introspection and bold action. The documents captured in the daring ambush were slowly compiled into an irrefutable dossier that chronicled years of systemic corruption, exploitation, and the relentless subversion of community rights. This dossier, once made public through trusted channels, promised to be a catalyst for change, an impetus for broader societal reforms that would resonate far beyond the confines of the valley. In the quiet intensity of one long, luminous afternoon, as sunlight filtered through the canopy of ancient trees and danced upon the gently undulating fields, Clara Everhart surveyed her land with a mixture of pride and solemn determination. Every furrow in the soil, every weathered stone and rusted gate, bore silent witness to the struggles of the past and the hopeful promise of a future reclaimed by its people. The legacy of Maple Ridge, now intertwined with the burgeoning movement for justice and accountability, was evolving into something greater than anyone had dared to imagine. It was a living testament to the power of unity, the efficacy of measured defiance, and the enduring truth that even the smallest among us could ignite a revolution of hope. Thus, in the radiant glow of that transformative day, as the valley breathed the fresh promise of summer and the distant rumble of approaching change stirred the still air, the battle for freedom entered a new chapter. The resistance, emboldened by both the evidence of the enemy's misdeeds and the solidarity of its own ranks, steeled itself for the challenges ahead. In the interplay of light and shadow on the land they called home, every heartbeat, every whispered secret, and every resolute step taken in the name of justice wove together a narrative that was as timeless as the land itself. The struggle was far from over, yet within the quiet determination of Clara and her people lay an unwavering certainty, that in unity there was strength, and in truth, the seeds of a brighter, liberated tomorrow were irrevocably sown. In the lingering heat of early summer, as the valley awoke under a relentless sun and the days stretched long with possibility, the momentum of the rebellion took on an even greater urgency. The once modest resistance that had coalesced around Maple Ridge was now an expansive network, its tendrils reaching into every secluded hamlet and dusty crossroads of the region. Clara Everhart, whose resolute leadership had become the beating heart of this movement, now faced the challenge of unifying a diverse coalition of determined souls. Each community carried its own scars and its own hopes, and while their collective will was formidable, the differences in their histories and struggles threatened to undermine the fragile unity they had built. Amid these tensions, Clara's focus was twofold: to fortify the internal bonds of trust and solidarity among her allies, and to expand their operations beyond the immediate borders of Maple Ridge. In the soft light of a sweltering afternoon, Clara convened a clandestine assembly in an abandoned barn at the outskirts of her farm. The barn, its timbers darkened by time and weather, its rafters echoing with memories of past harvests, had been transformed into a temporary war room. Maps of the region, marked with secret routes and potential choke points, covered a weathered table. Here, representatives from neighboring communities gathered in hushed clusters, their faces set in determination yet marred by the anxiety of unspoken doubts. Clara surveyed the room with a measured gaze, noting both the hardened expressions of those who had fought before and the nervous energy of newcomers who carried a desperate hope for change. The discussion turned to the recent revelations. The dossier of damning documents exposing the pervasive corruption of the Crimson Dominion, which had become a potent symbol of resistance. This evidence, meticulously compiled and now widely circulated among local networks, had sparked an emboldened defiance. It was not merely the exposure of illicit transactions or the uncovering of secret alliances, it was the shattering of an illusion that had long kept communities in a state of subdued acquiescence. The people now understood that the enemy's power was not absolute, that beneath the veneer of control lay a system ripe for dismantling by collective action. Yet, as plans were drawn and strategies refined, Clara recognized that the path forward was strewn with pitfalls. The enemy, sensing the swelling tide of resistance, had not retreated into the shadows. Instead, the Crimson Dominion was evolving its tactics with a ruthlessness that bordered on desperation. Intelligence reports whispered of covert units deployed under the cover of night, their mission clear: infiltrate the ranks of the insurgents, sow discord from within, and sabotage the carefully laid channels of communication. In response, Clara set about strengthening the inner sanctum of the movement. She organized discreet training sessions designed not only to sharpen the physical skills of her fighters but to fortify the mental resolve necessary to withstand the corrosive effects of betrayal. Every training exercise was imbued with a dual purpose: to hone tactical precision and to reinforce the bonds of trust among the diverse participants. Over the following weeks, a series of coordinated operations unfolded that would test the mettle of the united resistance. In one daring maneuver, a specially assembled team intercepted a heavily guarded convoy carrying critical supplies destined for a key outpost of the Crimson Dominion. The operation, executed in the dim glow of pre-dawn, was a masterclass in guerrilla warfare. The insurgents had anticipated every possible contingency. They blocked escape routes with overturned vehicles, rigged silent alarms along the periphery, and relied on the intricate network of secret passageways that spanned the countryside. As the ambush unfolded, the enemy's forces were thrown into disarray, a carefully choreographed chaos that underscored the resilience and strategic brilliance of the rebel cells. The successful seizure of the convoy was more than a tactical victory, it was a resounding affirmation of the possibility of challenging an entrenched system through unity and daring ingenuity. In the aftermath of the ambush, the valley pulsed with a renewed sense of purpose. News of the operation spread like wildfire, carried on the wings of word of mouth and the encrypted channels that had become the lifeblood of the movement. Yet, even as morale soared, Clara remained acutely aware of the dangers lurking in the periphery. The enemy's countermeasures were swift and unrelenting. In the quiet hours before dawn, isolated groups reported unsettling encounters with shadowy figures, agents of the Crimson Dominion intent on undermining the insurgents' efforts. There were moments when the boundaries between friend and foe blurred, as infiltrators attempted to blend in with local populations, their true allegiances masked by carefully constructed disguises. This constant specter of internal betrayal weighed heavily on Clara's mind, compelling her to implement additional layers of security and to insist on rigorous verification protocols for every new participant seeking to join the cause. Amid these challenges, Clara also dedicated herself to reinforcing the ideological foundations of the resistance. She understood that beyond the physical struggle lay an equally critical battle for hearts and minds. In quiet gatherings under the open sky, where the vast expanse of the valley offered both solace and a stage for reflection, she recounted the long history of communities rising against tyranny. These sessions were not grand speeches delivered from an elevated dais, but gentle, persuasive discourses that wove together the personal narratives of loss and triumph into a tapestry of collective identity. In these moments, the shared pain of oppression transformed into a galvanizing force, a testament to the fact that the struggle was not solely about reclaiming land or disrupting corrupt institutions, but about restoring dignity and hope to people whose lives had long been defined by quiet resignation. As summer deepened and the sun scorched the land, the movement's operations grew ever more sophisticated. New alliances were forged with influential figures from unexpected quarters, disillusioned officials, veteran activists, even a few journalists whose probing investigations had already begun to chip away at the veneer of invulnerability that cloaked the Crimson Dominion. These alliances brought with them fresh resources and novel strategies. With access to previously hidden channels of information, the resistance could now anticipate enemy movements with a precision that bordered on prescience. Clara's network became a mosaic of disparate elements, a coalition bound not only by the shared desire to topple an oppressive regime but by the belief in the transformative power of truth. In clandestine meetings held in remote locations, a derelict farmhouse, a hidden alcove within a stone wall, or even beneath the cover of a moonless night, plans were set into motion that would reverberate far beyond the confines of the valley. In one such meeting, a group of insurgents revealed their plan to stage a daring incursion into the heart of an enemy-controlled compound. The objective was not simply to gather intelligence or to disrupt a single operation, but to penetrate the nerve center of the Crimson Dominion's power and extract irrefutable evidence of its corruption. The risks were monumental. Failure would not only mean the loss of valuable lives but could also shatter the fragile unity that had been painstakingly cultivated over months of struggle. Yet, the promise of exposing the full extent of the enemy's crimes, a revelation that could ignite widespread outrage and catalyze a broader uprising, provided an impetus that overshadowed the peril. Clara, whose resolve had been steeled by years of quiet endurance and unswerving commitment, lent her unwavering support to the plan. With her guidance, every detail was meticulously scrutinized, every potential flaw addressed with the precision of a master tactician. The ensuing days were a blur of covert preparations, secret routes were mapped out, safe houses double-checked, and contingency plans drafted in the event of an unforeseen ambush. As the day of the incursion drew near, the tension among the insurgents was palpable, a mix of apprehension and determination that filled every whispered conversation and furtive glance. Clara herself walked the perimeter of Maple Ridge with a silent vigilance, her eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of impending danger. The land, which had borne witness to generations of hardship and hope, seemed to pulse with a collective heartbeat, a subtle, rhythmic affirmation of the people's readiness to risk everything for the sake of a future untainted by corruption. In the quiet moments before the operation commenced, Clara reflected on the enormity of their undertaking. This was not merely a tactical maneuver, it was a defining moment in the struggle for justice. Every sacrifice, every sleepless night, and every act of defiance had led to this singular point of decision, a moment when the scales of power could be irrevocably tipped in favor of those who had long been marginalized. The incursion itself unfolded in a series of calculated moves that demonstrated the full measure of the resistance's ingenuity. Under the cloak of darkness, the specially trained team slipped through the enemy's periphery, their progress marked by silent signals and synchronized movements. They navigated a labyrinth of corridors, their every step a testament to the countless hours of preparation and the shared trust that bound them together. In the heart of the compound, where the weight of the Crimson Dominion's secrets lay hidden behind layers of guarded protocols, the insurgents found what they had been seeking, a trove of incriminating documents, digital records, and covert correspondence that painted an unassailable portrait of systemic abuse and exploitation. The operation was executed with a precision that defied expectation, alarms were muted, enemy patrols evaded, and within a few harrowing hours, the team had secured the evidence that would, they hoped, bring about a reckoning for the oppressive regime. As dawn broke over the valley, the captured evidence began its journey from the shadows into the light of public scrutiny. The dissemination of the documents, carried out through secure channels and trusted networks of journalists, ignited a firestorm of revelation. The details of corruption, bribery, and calculated manipulation spilled into the public domain, stirring indignation and mobilizing support far beyond the borders of Maple Ridge. The impact was immediate and profound. Protests erupted in nearby towns, local officials were forced to resign under the weight of mounting pressure, and the long-hidden truths of the Crimson Dominion's misdeeds became a rallying cry for a wider movement seeking justice and reform. Yet, even as the enemy's facade crumbled in the wake of public exposure, Clara and her allies knew that their struggle was far from over. The incursion had been a high-risk gambit, a momentary triumph that, while monumental, was but one chapter in a protracted battle against entrenched power. In the quiet aftermath of the operation, as the valley bathed in the gentle glow of a new day, the resistance reconvened to assess its next steps. The evidence they had secured was a powerful weapon, but the enemy would not relinquish its grip without a fight. The Crimson Dominion, though reeling from the shock of public disgrace, was already mobilizing its remaining forces, its operatives regrouping in a desperate bid to salvage what remained of their crumbling authority. In this precarious balance between victory and vulnerability, Clara Everhart stood as a beacon of unwavering determination. The journey had transformed her from a solitary caretaker of a modest farm into the visionary leader of a burgeoning movement. With every calculated step, every whispered strategy in the dead of night, she had woven together a tapestry of defiance that spanned not just the fields of Maple Ridge but the hearts of countless people yearning for change. As the resistance prepared for the inevitable counteroffensive, the air was thick with anticipation, a mix of apprehension and hope that underscored the magnitude of their undertaking. The valley, scarred by past struggles yet imbued with the promise of renewal, bore silent testimony to the resilience of its people. The struggle for justice was not one of grand, sweeping gestures alone, it was the sum of countless small acts of courage, a shared determination to reclaim dignity from the jaws of oppression. In every hidden corner, every secret meeting, and every whispered message, the spirit of resistance pulsed with life. And as Clara looked out over the fields bathed in the soft light of morning, she knew that the fight ahead would require not only strength and strategy but also the unyielding belief that even the smallest spark could ignite a revolution. Thus, in the unfolding days that followed the audacious incursion, the battle for freedom surged onward, a testament to the power of unity, the relentless pursuit of truth, and the enduring hope that, no matter the cost, the spirit of a united people would prevail over tyranny. The legacy of Maple Ridge was being rewritten in every act of defiance, every captured secret, and every heart that beat in solidarity with the cause. And in that ongoing struggle, the promise of a brighter, liberated tomorrow was sown deeply into the very soil of the land they all called home. As summer gradually gave way to the hazy promise of early autumn, the valley braced itself for a transformation that was as much internal as it was external. The rebellion, which had gained momentum through calculated strikes and public revelations, now stood at a precipice where the next phase of their struggle would demand even greater sacrifices and daring ingenuity. In the waning days of summer's heat, Clara Everhart, ever the steadfast guardian of Maple Ridge, sensed that the enemy, though battered by the force of truth, was gathering its remaining might for a decisive counteroffensive. The Crimson Dominion, reeling from the public disgrace wrought by the daring incursion, was consolidating its forces, seeking to reclaim control over the region by any means necessary. In this moment of looming confrontation, Clara doubled her efforts to strengthen the internal cohesion of her diverse coalition. The resistance had grown into a mosaic of communities and individuals whose lives had been forever altered by the struggle for justice. Leaders from neighboring hamlets, once strangers bound together by the common thread of oppression, now met frequently with Clara in a series of secret convocations held under the muted light of dusk. In these gatherings, strategies were debated with a fervor tempered by the wisdom of hard-won experience. Every member, from the seasoned veteran whose scars bore silent testimony to previous battles to the young idealist whose eyes shimmered with unyielding hope, contributed to a collective blueprint aimed at not only repelling the enemy but also ushering in a lasting transformation of their world. The overarching strategy began to take shape as a two-pronged campaign, one that combined a robust defensive posture with proactive measures intended to dismantle the remaining vestiges of the Crimson Dominion's power. Clara spearheaded initiatives to fortify the physical barriers of Maple Ridge, expanding the network of hidden outposts and safe houses that had become the lifeline of their clandestine operations. Along rugged ridges and in secluded hollows of the surrounding woodlands, newly recruited fighters were trained in guerrilla tactics and rapid response maneuvers. Their training was rigorous and unrelenting, designed to forge a cadre of defenders capable of striking swiftly and vanishing into the anonymity of the wilderness. Every new skill acquired, every covert drill executed beneath the cover of night, reinforced the conviction that even the most formidable enemy could be overcome when united by a common purpose. Yet, as the preparations for defense grew ever more sophisticated, Clara recognized that the psychological battleground was equally critical. The Crimson Dominion had relied on fear and subterfuge to maintain its grip on power, and now the resistance had to wrest back the narrative. In a series of carefully orchestrated public acts, quiet demonstrations of resilience and solidarity, the people of Maple Ridge sought to reclaim their dignity and assert their right to self-determination. Secret messages, once exchanged only in whispers among trusted allies, were now disseminated more broadly through underground networks and sympathetic media channels. These messages, imbued with the raw urgency of a people on the brink, began to galvanize support beyond the confines of the valley, drawing attention from distant regions where the taste of oppression was all too familiar. Amid this evolving landscape of resistance, a critical intelligence report arrived one misty morning, delivered by a trusted courier whose path had been fraught with danger. The report detailed a forthcoming maneuver by the Crimson Dominion, a massive, coordinated offensive aimed at shattering the core of the insurgency by targeting key supply routes and communication hubs. The document, meticulously compiled and corroborated by multiple sources, outlined not only the enemy's tactical intentions but also hinted at an internal power struggle within the Dominion's ranks. This revelation was a double-edged sword. While it confirmed the immediacy of the threat, it also suggested the possibility of exploiting fissures within the enemy's command structure. Clara, whose mind was as sharp as the plowshares that once tilled her family's fields, saw in this intel an opportunity to turn the tide. Under her direction, a select team of trusted operatives was mobilized to intercept and analyze further details of the impending assault. These operatives, moving under the cover of dense fog and the quiet murmur of a waking land, infiltrated enemy perimeters and secured vital documents that shed light on the planned offensive. Their daring actions, executed with the stealth and precision that had come to define the resistance, confirmed that the Crimson Dominion intended to launch its strike at the very moment when Maple Ridge's defenses were most vulnerable. The intelligence was unsettling in its clarity, a stark reminder that the enemy was prepared to unleash a torrent of violence to reclaim what they believed was rightfully theirs. Yet, it also offered a glimmer of hope. If the internal discord hinted at in the report could be further stoked, it might splinter the Dominion's resolve from within. Clara convened an emergency council in the shadow of a weathered stone outcropping that overlooked the fertile fields of Maple Ridge. Under the muted light of an overcast sky, representatives from the Allied communities gathered to deliberate on the new intelligence. The air was thick with anticipation and a collective sense of foreboding, as every word spoken was weighed against the potential cost in lives and future freedoms. The council's discussions were marked by a tension that was palpable, a tension born of the realization that the coming days would test not only their martial prowess but also the very spirit that had sustained them through years of hardship. Strategies were revised on the spot, contingency plans were drafted to counter the enemy's maneuver, and backup communication channels were established in case the main network was compromised. In the midst of this frenetic preparation, Clara maintained a calm determination that radiated like a beacon to those around her. Her presence was a steadying force, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, the collective will of a united people could triumph over the forces of tyranny. She spent long hours walking the periphery of Maple Ridge, her keen eyes scanning the horizon for any signs of enemy movement. The land, with its rolling hills and ancient groves, seemed to whisper encouragement, a silent chorus that bolstered her resolve. In her mind's eye, she saw the faces of those who had sacrificed so much, the eyes of children who dreamed of a future free from fear, and the steadfast hearts of those who believed that justice was worth every hardship. As twilight descended on the eve of the anticipated offensive, the valley was enveloped in a surreal calm, a deceptive quiet that belied the storm about to break. Under a sky heavy with gathering clouds, the Allied operatives took their positions along the critical supply lines and key vantage points. The network of resistance, now more expansive and interconnected than ever, braced itself for the inevitable clash. Every hidden outpost, every covert signal, and every whispered directive was a testament to the unity and unyielding determination of a people who had long endured the oppressive weight of corruption and fear. The stage was set for a confrontation that would test the limits of their courage, a battle that promised to reshape not only the destiny of Maple Ridge but also the broader struggle for freedom that had taken root across the region. In that tense, anticipatory silence before the break of battle, Clara's thoughts turned inward. She recalled the early days of solitary toil on the farm, the quiet moments of introspection as she watched the sun rise over fields that had known both hardship and hope. Now, those same fields were the crucible in which a revolution was being forged, a revolution defined not by the clamor of war but by the unyielding power of unity and truth. With the evidence of the enemy's internal strife now in hand and the full force of a resolute community poised for action, the next chapter in this relentless struggle was about to be written in the blood and honor of those who dared to stand against tyranny. Thus, as the last rays of daylight gave way to the encroaching darkness, the valley held its breath. The impending offensive loomed like a tempest on the horizon, a challenge that would demand every ounce of strength, every spark of ingenuity, and every beat of the united heart that now pulsed within Maple Ridge and its allied communities. In that moment of stillness, Clara Everhart, with eyes that shone with the quiet fire of conviction, stood ready to lead her people into the fray, a leader whose legacy was being etched into the annals of history. One brave act at a time. On the cold, heavy morning that broke the stillness of the valley, a palpable tension gripped every heart within Maple Ridge and its allied communities. The long-anticipated offensive, heralded by the whispered warnings and secret signals of the previous night, had finally arrived. The valley, usually a quiet expanse of farmland and rolling hills, now throbbed with the urgency of impending battle. Under a sky churning with turbulent clouds, the first stirrings of enemy forces emerged like specters along the distant ridges. Clara Everhart, standing at the crest of a small rise overlooking her transformed homestead, felt a familiar surge of determination mingle with the weight of responsibility. Every detail of the land, the silent murmur of a stream, the stoic posture of ancient oaks, the uneven contours of the terrain, seemed to hold a story of resistance passed down through generations. Today, that legacy would be put to the ultimate test. In the early hours before dawn, the Allied operatives had already positioned themselves with meticulous precision. Hidden caches of arms, hastily reinforced barricades, and secret communication relays dotted the landscape like the scattered pieces of an intricate puzzle. Each safe house and concealed outpost had been fortified under Clara's watchful eye, becoming both sanctuaries and strategic vantage points. The network that had been carefully nurtured over months of painstaking work was now a living, breathing organism, ready to respond as one cohesive force to the enemy's calculated assault. As the first enemy convoy crested the far ridge, their silhouettes blurred by the mist and the low-hanging clouds, a prearranged signal, an almost imperceptible flash of light from a concealed lantern, brought a quiet confirmation to Clara's command center. In that moment, every operative in the field was alerted. The enemy had made its move. The Crimson Dominion's forces, now belying their previous confidence with a desperate urgency, surged forward along the main supply routes. Their approach was methodical and forceful, designed to overwhelm through sheer numbers and technological superiority. Yet, the very nature of their advance was also a gamble, a calculated risk that left them exposed to the precision of guerrilla tactics honed over long months of resistance. Within minutes, the first skirmishes erupted along the narrow lanes that wound through the valley. The enemy's armored vehicles, their engines rumbling with the promise of unyielding force, were ambushed by small, agile units that had learned to use the land as both shield and weapon. Behind natural cover provided by clusters of rocky outcrops and dense thickets, rebel fighters emerged silently, their coordinated movements an echo of the secret drills conducted in the darkness of previous nights. The clash was not marked by the clamor of full-scale warfare but by the sudden, precise strikes of determined individuals whose aim was to disrupt rather than destroy. In one such engagement, a carefully orchestrated diversion drew a contingent of enemy troops away from a critical communications hub, allowing a second team to move in and disable key transmission equipment with swift, surgical precision. Amid the orchestrated chaos, Clara remained a constant presence, a figure of unwavering calm amid the storm of conflict. From her concealed vantage point on a ridge overlooking the central plains of Maple Ridge, she observed the unfolding battle with eyes that missed no detail. Each skirmish, every burst of gunfire and flash of tracer rounds, was recorded in her mind as part of a larger mosaic of resistance. She recognized that the enemy's offensive was not merely a brute force attempt to reclaim control but a desperate measure aimed at fracturing the unity that had come to define her community's resolve. With every strategic move made by her allies, the calculated countermeasures that disrupted enemy formations and sowed confusion among the ranks, Clara could sense the scales beginning to tip in their favor. The valley itself became a dynamic battlefield. Narrow lanes that had once served as simple country roads were now battlegrounds where the interplay of light and shadow concealed ambushes at every turn. The fields, dotted with the remnants of weathered farm equipment and newly improvised barricades, resonated with the silent thunder of determination. In the thick of the conflict, each rebel unit acted not in isolation but as an integral part of a larger, meticulously coordinated plan. Small groups, working in tandem, executed rapid strikes on enemy convoys, seizing critical supplies and temporarily disrupting the flow of reinforcements. These acts of defiance, though on a tactical scale, carried immense symbolic weight, each successful engagement a testament to the power of unity over oppression. Elsewhere in the valley, hidden teams were tasked with a different but equally crucial mission, to intercept enemy communications and relay real-time intelligence back to Clara's command center. Utilizing a network of repurposed radio equipment and ingenious, locally fabricated devices, these operatives eavesdropped on enemy channels, piecing together the evolving strategy of the Crimson Dominion. Their reports, transmitted in rapid bursts of coded messages, painted a picture of an enemy struggling to adapt to the unexpected resilience of the resistance. The internal discord hinted at in earlier intelligence now manifested as hesitations and miscommunications within the enemy ranks, small fissures that the rebels intended to widen into chasms. As the morning advanced, the battle lines solidified along the natural contours of the valley. Clara directed her forces with a measured precision, her orders transmitted through a series of prearranged signals that resonated with the weight of collective purpose. She was acutely aware that the outcome of this confrontation would have far-reaching implications, not only for the survival of Maple Ridge but for the broader struggle against the corrupt regime that had long oppressed the region. Every operative, whether on the front lines or operating in the shadows, was a vital thread in the intricate tapestry of resistance, and Clara's leadership had become the linchpin upon which their hopes were balanced. In a particularly fierce engagement near a narrow gorge where a small stream cut through the rugged terrain, enemy forces attempted to establish a foothold. Their heavy boots disturbed the natural silence of the canyon, and their shouts echoed off the stone walls. Yet, the rebels were already waiting. Utilizing the natural acoustics of the gorge and concealed within the rocky outcrops, a unit led by a seasoned fighter executed a counterattack that was as swift as it was brutal. In a well-coordinated flurry of movement, they disarmed and dispersed the enemy soldiers, leaving behind only the dissonant echo of chaos and a tangible message of defiance. The victory in the gorge was not an isolated incident, it was a microcosm of the larger battle, a demonstration that ingenuity and intimate knowledge of the land could overcome even the most formidable adversaries. As the day wore on, the heat of summer began to mingle with the charged energy of combat. Smoke from controlled fires and the sporadic bursts of gunfire created an almost surreal tapestry in the air, a living canvas that bore witness to the struggle unfolding below. In the midst of the fray, Clara took a moment to survey the broader picture. The enemy, though still powerful, was clearly rattled by the unyielding resistance of a united people. Their formations, once rigid and precise, now exhibited signs of disarray. The resistance's earlier successes had sown seeds of doubt and hesitation among the ranks of the Crimson Dominion. In that fleeting moment of observation, Clara recognized both the immense progress they had made and the long road that still lay ahead. Every victory on the battlefield was tempered by the realization that the war was not yet won. The Crimson Dominion, driven by desperation and the need to reclaim lost ground, regrouped and began to mount countermeasures that threatened to overwhelm isolated rebel positions. In response, the leadership at Maple Ridge, under Clara's unerring guidance, refined their tactics further. The emphasis shifted from purely reactive measures to a more proactive stance, one that sought to dismantle the enemy's infrastructure and choke the lifelines that sustained their operations. Saboteurs were dispatched to target critical supply depots, disrupt fuel lines, and erode the logistical network that underpinned the enemy's war machine. Every act of subterfuge, every carefully executed disruption, was a step toward a broader strategy that sought to render the Crimson Dominion impotent in the face of relentless collective will. Meanwhile, the human cost of the conflict weighed heavily on the hearts of those who had once been ordinary citizens. In the makeshift infirmaries set up in secure locations, wounded fighters received care from volunteers who had mastered the art of healing in conditions far removed from the comforts of modern medicine. The shared experience of sacrifice, of loss and of hope, further tightened the bonds among the rebels, transforming them from disparate individuals into a single, unbreakable force. In quiet moments between battles, as the sun dipped low and bathed the valley in a muted, amber glow, whispers of remembrance and quiet vows of perseverance filled the air. These were the moments when the true essence of their struggle came into focus, a struggle not merely for land or for power, but for the very right to live with dignity, to shape a future free from the tyranny that had long cast its shadow over their lives. Throughout the tumultuous hours of the offensive, Clara remained a constant, unwavering presence at the heart of the resistance. Her eyes, reflecting both the pain of loss and the fierce hope of a new dawn, never wavered from the task at hand. Each decision she made was guided by an inner compass forged in the crucible of hardship, and every action was a testament to her belief that even in the darkest moments, the light of collective resolve could drive back the encroaching night. The battle of that day was not marked by a single, decisive victory, but by a series of hard-fought engagements that collectively served to chip away at the enemy's resolve. And as the day gradually yielded to the encroaching chill of evening, it was clear that while the Crimson Dominion had not been vanquished, its grip on the valley had been irrevocably loosened. In the fading light, as the echoes of combat mingled with the soft rustling of wine through the fields, Clara gathered with her core team in a secure, secluded clearing. There, amid the scars of battle and the silent testimony of a land that had borne witness to both suffering and triumph, they took stock of the day's events. The enemy had been repelled from several key positions, and critical supply lines had been disrupted beyond immediate repair. Yet, the cost had been high, lives had been lost, and wounds, both physical and emotional, would linger long after the battle subsided. In the reflective quiet of that gathering, there was no triumphant celebration, only a sober acknowledgement of the price of resistance and a renewed commitment to the cause. Clara's words, though few, carried the weight of unyielding determination. The fight was far from over, and every sacrifice made today would serve as a beacon for the future. As darkness finally claimed the valley, the rebels retreated into their hidden refuges, carrying with them the hard-won knowledge that their united spirit had withstood the first full fury of the enemy's offensive. The night was long and fraught with uncertainty, yet it was also filled with the quiet resolve of hearts that had refused to be broken. In that enduring silence, the legacy of Maple Ridge and its defiant inhabitants was etched deeper into the land, a legacy that would be remembered in every whispered tale of courage, every scar borne by the survivors, and every new dawn that promised the slow, steady march toward a future free from tyranny. In the lingering aftermath of the fierce offensive, as the valley began to settle into a deceptive calm beneath a pallid sky, the battered yet unyielding spirit of Maple Ridge and its allied communities entered a period of reflection and regrouping. The echoes of the day's battles still reverberated along the winding country lanes and through the broken remnants of hastily abandoned outposts. Clara Everhart, ever the steadfast guardian of this enduring rebellion, stood amidst the scattered debris of conflict with eyes that held both the sorrow of loss and the fierce glimmer of determination. The once pristine fields, now marked by the scars of ambushes and the silent testimony of shattered barricades, bore witness to the heavy cost of defiance. Yet, in every furrow of disturbed soil and every whispered prayer of those gathered in secret clearings, there pulsed a renewed resolve, a commitment to forge ahead despite the wounds inflicted by the enemy's relentless assault. In the days following the tumultuous offensive, Clara convened her closest lieutenants in a concealed meeting place nestled deep within an old stone barn at the edge of the woods. The structure, its walls mottled with the fading memories of happier times, had been transformed into an impromptu war room. Here, maps spanned weather tables, and scribbled notes detailed every skirmish, every maneuver executed during the morning's battle. The faces around the table, etched with grief, fatigue, and stubborn hope, spoke of a shared understanding that the struggle was far from over. Each leader recounted fragments of the day's events, the rapid strikes along narrow gorges, the ambushes in shadowed clearings, and the intermittent yet resolute disruptions of enemy communications. Their voices, low and measured, melded into a collective vow to learn from every setback and adapt strategies with even greater precision. While the battlefield had momentarily quieted, the threat of the Crimson Dominion loomed larger than ever. Intelligence gathered in the chaotic moments of combat revealed that the enemy, though visibly rattled, had not retreated but was already mobilizing for a renewed push, a counteroffensive designed to exploit the vulnerabilities exposed by the rebels' impromptu victories. Reports of enemy reinforcements, moving swiftly under the cover of dense woodland and approaching supply depots with renewed urgency, ignited a palpable tension among the insurgents. It was clear that the Crimson Dominion was determined to reassert its dominance, even if that dominance came at the cost of further bloodshed. Clara, aware that time was both a friend and a foe, directed her focus toward reinforcing both the tangible and intangible assets of the resistance. The next phase of their struggle would be defined not solely by acts of guerrilla warfare but by a broader campaign of rebuilding trust, consolidating alliances, and preparing for a protracted contest against an enemy that thrived on sowing discord. Over the following weeks, the community embarked on an arduous process of restoration. Makeshift infirmaries were established in secure locations where wounded fighters received care from seasoned medics whose gentle ministrations belied the harsh realities of life on the run. These safe havens, hidden behind thickets and camouflaged by the natural contours of the land, became symbols of both survival and hope, a promise that every scar borne in battle would be met with a spirit that refused to be broken. Amid the practical necessities of recovery, Clara devoted herself to a quieter, yet equally vital mission, the healing of the fractured collective spirit. In hushed gatherings held under the soft glow of twilight, where the gentle murmur of distant streams provided a soothing counterpoint to memories of strife, she encouraged her fellow insurgents to share stories of loss, resilience, and dreams for the future. These intimate moments of vulnerability forged bonds stronger than any tactical alliance, knitting together a mosaic of personal histories into a unified narrative of resistance. In these sessions, the pain of recent battles was acknowledged and mourned, yet it was also transformed into a driving force, a reminder that every sacrifice made was a step toward reclaiming the dignity and autonomy that had long been denied. As the valley settled into a cautious lull, clandestine operations continued with an intensity that belied the stillness of the landscape. Small teams, their numbers reduced but their determination undiminished, scouted enemy positions, disrupted supply chains, and intercepted transmissions that could yield further insight into the Crimson Dominion's evolving strategies. Each mission, whether a daring raid on a remote outpost or a covert operation to gather critical intelligence, was executed with a blend of meticulous planning and spontaneous bravery. The network of safe houses, once established as temporary refuges, was expanded and fortified, secret routes were mapped anew, and contingency plans were redrafted with the awareness that the enemy's next move could come at any moment. In this period of recovery and recalibration, the role of Clara as both leader and symbol of resilience took on renewed significance. Her daily routine, once centered solely on the physical upkeep of Maple Ridge, now encompassed a broader vision. She walked the familiar paths across the farm with a measured pace, her keen eyes not only scanning for enemy intrusions but also observing the subtle changes in the land, new shoots breaking through the disturbed earth, streams that had swelled with the recent rains, and the quiet, persistent hum of life reclaiming its space. To her, these signs were a silent promise that even in the wake of devastation, renewal was inevitable. They served as a constant reminder that the struggle for freedom was not merely a battle fought in moments of violence but a continuous, living process of transformation, a transformation that began with the individual heart and radiated outward to embrace an entire community. Beyond the borders of Maple Ridge, the ripple effects of the insurgents' public exposure of the Crimson Dominion's corruption began to manifest in subtle yet significant ways. In neighboring hamlets and distant valleys, citizens who had long felt the oppressive weight of systemic injustice found their own voices awakening. Spontaneous protests broke out in small town squares, and previously silent community leaders emerged from the shadows to demand accountability. Newspapers, once constrained by the shackles of censorship and collusion, published editorials that echoed the revelations uncovered by the resistance. In these unfolding events, the struggle of Maple Ridge was no longer an isolated chapter in a remote corner of the country, it had become a beacon for a broader movement that sought to dismantle the pervasive networks of power that had long subjugated ordinary lives. Clara's network of allies, now bolstered by these burgeoning movements, began to forge strategic partnerships that transcended local boundaries. Meetings were arranged in secret locations where representatives from various communities, activists, and reform-minded officials convened to share insights and coordinate efforts. The dialogues were marked by a cautious optimism, a recognition that while the path ahead was fraught with danger, the united front they presented could inspire change on a scale previously unimaginable. Plans were drawn to launch a series of coordinated actions that would not only weaken the enemy's grip on the region but also set the stage for systemic reforms. These plans ranged from targeted strikes on critical infrastructure to broad campaigns aimed at empowering disenfranchised voices in public discourse. In the midst of this whirlwind of activity, Clara maintained a singular focus: the protection of her people and the preservation of the land that had nurtured them through generations. She personally oversaw the reinforcement of defensive perimeters around Maple Ridge, ensuring that every possible vulnerability was addressed, from the installation of rudimentary yet effective alarm systems crafted from salvaged materials to the discreet placement of scouts along the borders. Each measure, however small, contributed to a growing fortress of resilience that would serve as both a deterrent to enemy advances and a sanctuary for those caught in the crossfire of ideological warfare. The nights during this period were often long and fraught with tension. Under the vast, star-strewn canopy of the countryside, Clara would stand alone at the edge of her property, the cool night air a stark contrast to the warmth of the memories of battles past. In these solitary moments, she contemplated the delicate balance between hope and despair, a balance that hung by a thread in a world where every decision could tip the scales toward either liberation or ruin. It was in these reflective hours that she drew strength from the unspoken promises of the land, that every hardship endured was an investment in a future where justice, equality, and freedom were not mere aspirations but lived realities. As autumn deepened, the valley transformed once more. The vibrant greens of summer faded into a tapestry of amber, rust, and deep gold, a visual metaphor for the enduring cycle of decay and renewal that had come to define both nature and the human spirit. The changing leaves, carried on cool, wistful breezes, whispered of the passage of time and the inevitability of transformation. For the people of Maple Ridge, each fallen leaf was a silent testament to both loss and rebirth, a reminder that even as old structures crumbled under the weight of corruption, new foundations could be laid upon the fertile ground of hope and unity. In this evolving landscape, Clara's leadership shone with an unwavering clarity. She navigated the complexities of both internal dissent and external threats with a calm authority that belied the turbulence of the times. Every meeting, every operation, and every moment of quiet reflection contributed to a growing narrative of resistance, a narrative that was as much about reclaiming the dignity of a people as it was about dismantling the oppressive networks that had long held sway. And as the days lengthened in the future, uncertain yet brimming with possibility, unfurled before her, Clara Everhart remained resolute in her belief that the collective strength of a united community could, in time, reshape not only the destiny of Maple Ridge but also the broader fabric of society itself. Thus, as the valley settled into a new rhythm, one punctuated by cautious optimism, renewed strategic vigor, and the quiet determination to rebuild, a profound transformation was underway. The struggle for freedom had entered a phase of introspection and consolidation, where every act of resilience, every whispered plan in the darkness, and every shared moment of humanity wove together to form the tapestry of a future that was steadily being reclaimed from the clutches of tyranny. And in that unfolding saga, the legacy of Maple Ridge and the indomitable spirit of its people would continue to inspire countless others to rise, resist, and reclaim the right to a life defined not by oppression, but by hope, unity, and an unyielding commitment to justice. In the cool, reflective stillness of a late autumn afternoon, as the sun dipped low behind the ancient ridges and painted the valley in hues of crimson and gold, the fate of Maple Ridge and its united resistance entered its defining moment. The campaign that had begun with the quiet determination of a single farm and grown into a sprawling movement of hope, courage, and defiant unity was now poised to deliver a conclusion that would forever alter the balance of power in the region. Clara Everhart, whose unwavering resolve had guided the people through battles of strategy and heart, now surveyed the land with a profound mixture of sorrow, pride, and cautious optimism. In the deepening twilight, every shadow, every whisper of whine through the withering leaves, seemed to carry the echoes of all those who had fought, lost, and dreamed of a better tomorrow. In the final days of the oppressive regime, the Crimson Dominion's influence had been steadily eroded by the collective efforts of communities that refused to bow in silence. The movement's operations, once confined to secret rendezvous and covert ambushes, had expanded into a broad campaign of political awakening and structural reform. Over months of relentless struggle, a network of local leaders, activists, and everyday citizens had coalesced around a single purpose: to expose corruption at its core and reclaim the dignity of communities that had long been marginalized by those who thrived on fear. The evidence captured during the daring incursion had become a rallying cry that resonated far beyond the narrow confines of Maple Ridge. Journalists, emboldened by the clarity of truth, began to publish stories that detailed the depths of systemic abuse. Officials, compelled by public outrage, started to resign in droves. And ordinary citizens, armed with a newfound confidence, took to the streets in peaceful protest, demanding accountability and reform. Amid this rising tide of transformation, Clara and her inner circle meticulously prepared for one final, decisive operation, a mission that would strike at the heart of the enemy's remaining stronghold and force an irrevocable shift in the regional power dynamics. The plan was as audacious as it was meticulously crafted, a coordinated assault designed to capture the command center of the Crimson Dominion, dismantle its last vestiges of control, and secure definitive evidence of its crimes for international oversight. For weeks, trusted operatives moved silently through the labyrinthine corridors of abandoned warehouses, underground tunnels, and fortified compounds that had once been symbols of tyrannical power. Every step was measured, every contingency rehearsed under the harsh light of reality, for failure was a prospect none were willing to entertain. The operation was a synthesis of all that had been learned over years of struggle, a blend of guerrilla tactics, careful intelligence gathering, and the collective will of a community that had grown beyond the limitations of its past. On the eve of the assault, as night descended like a velvet shroud over the valley, Clara found herself alone on a familiar hill overlooking Maple Ridge. The farm, with its weathered barns and fields that had borne the imprint of both hardship and hope, lay quiet in the silver glow of moonlight. In that solitary moment of reflection, memories surged forth, of early mornings spent sowing seeds in defiant silence, of whispered promises exchanged in the dark, of the relentless march of progress that had turned despair into determination. The faces of friends, comrades, and even those lost along the way shimmered in her mind, each one a testament to the indomitable spirit of resistance. It was in that stillness that Clara reaffirmed her belief that the struggle was never about individual glory, but about the collective right to live with dignity, to dream freely, and to shape a future that rejected the tyranny of exploitation. When dawn finally broke with the first light of a new era, the valley was abuzz with the subdued intensity of a final battle about to be waged. The Allied forces, now a diverse tapestry of rebels, local militia, and newly awakened citizens, converged silently along the perimeter of the enemy's compound. The air was charged with an electric blend of anticipation and resolve. Every operative knew that the stakes were higher than ever, that the success of this mission would not only liberate their immediate community but set a precedent for the dismantling of oppression across the wider region. At Clara's steady command, the final phase was set in motion. In a symphony of precise movements and carefully timed signals, units advanced from all directions, some cloaked in the cover of dense woodland, others emerging along hidden routes fashioned from the very contours of the land. The enemy, though still attempting to marshal its remaining strength, found itself confronted by a force that was no longer disparate and frightened, but united and resolute. The ensuing confrontation was swift and unyielding. Under the coordinated assault, the enemy's defenses, once formidable and unassailable, began to crumble. In the chaos of clashing forces, armed insurgents infiltrated the command center, overcoming layers of security with the cold efficiency of those who had long prepared for this very moment. Amid the clamor of battle, strategic nodes of communication and control were seized, their takeover marking the collapse of the Crimson Dominion's final bastions. The operation, executed with an almost surgical precision, left no doubt as to the irreversible shift in power. The rebel forces, in one sweeping, unifying act, dismantled the infrastructure of fear and replaced it with the promise of transparent governance and justice. In the aftermath of the decisive assault, as the enemy's remnants either fled into obscurity or surrendered their arms, a profound silence fell over the valley, a silence that spoke volumes of both the cost of the struggle and the hope of a reborn society. For days, the liberated compound became a center of fervent activity as the captured documents, digital records, and first-hand testimonies were compiled into a comprehensive dossier destined to serve as the cornerstone for sweeping reforms. International observers, already attuned to the murmurs of revolution in distant corners of the globe, began to take note. The revelations emanating from Maple Ridge ignited a cascade of inquiries, sparking debates in legislative halls and the pages of global media. The transformation was not merely a local victory, it was the catalyst for a broader movement aimed at uprooting entrenched corruption and reimagining governance based on transparency, accountability, and the empowerment of communities. As the weeks turned into months, the immediate scars of battle began to fade, replaced by the steady, deliberate work of reconstruction and reconciliation. Clara Everhart, now recognized not simply as the guardian of a small farm but as a visionary leader who had helped ignite a revolution of hope, dedicated herself to the long-term healing of her community. Under her guidance, local assemblies were formed to oversee the transition from conflict to peaceful governance. These assemblies, composed of representatives from every corner of the now liberated region, worked tirelessly to rebuild not only infrastructure but the very social fabric that had been torn apart by years of oppression. New policies were drafted to ensure that the hard-won victories would not be lost to future cycles of exploitation, educational programs were launched to foster a spirit of civic engagement, and a robust system of checks and balances was introduced to guard against the resurgence of authoritarian rule. The legacy of Maple Ridge, forged in the crucible of unyielding defiance and nurtured by the enduring belief in collective power, became a beacon for others far beyond the valley's borders. Across the country and even in distant lands, communities that had long suffered under similar systems of control looked to the revolution of Maple Ridge as a source of inspiration. The story of Clara Everhart and her people, their long struggle, their many sacrifices, and their ultimate triumph, spread through underground networks, media outlets, and even academic circles, igniting a renewed dialogue on the importance of grassroots resistance and the transformative power of unity. In universities, symposiums were held to study the methods of the rebellion. In public squares, murals were painted to commemorate the fallen and celebrate the victorious, and in the hearts of countless individuals, the idea that ordinary people could indeed challenge and overcome even the most entrenched powers took firm root. In the final analysis, the struggle of Maple Ridge was not measured solely by the battles fought or the territories reclaimed, but by the profound transformation of the community's spirit. The once silent fields, the weathered barns, and the humble homestead of Clara Everhart had become symbols of resilience, courage, and the unyielding belief in the possibility of a just future. The journey, marked by moments of heartbreaking loss and exhilarating triumph, underscored a timeless truth, that the pursuit of freedom and dignity is a continuous process, a flame that must be continually tended, nurtured by the sacrifices of the past and the hopeful vision of tomorrow. As the sun set on the final day of conflict and rose on a new era of peace and renewal, Clara stood once more at the threshold of Maple Ridge. The landscape before her, bathed in the gentle glow of dawn and echoing with the murmurs of a community awakened, was not defined by the scars of yesterday but by the promise of tomorrow. In that radiant moment, the legacy of struggle merged seamlessly with the aspirations of a liberated people, a legacy that would serve as an eternal reminder that even the smallest spark of resistance can ignite a revolution of hope, unity, and enduring justice.